The last thing I saw clearly was Josh's face. He was 20 feet away, fighting through a wall of bodies to reach me. His mouth was forming my name. I couldn't hear him anymore. The sound of the dead had swallowed everything else, that wet, grinding chorus of teeth and hunger and bodies pressing together. The noise filled the world. It drowned out the gunfire. It drowned out the screaming. It drowned out him. Josh had a steel pipe in his hands. He swung it hard enough to cave in a skull. Another zombie grabbed him, then another. He disappeared for a second beneath a crush of bodies. My heart stopped. No, I screamed it. At least I think I did. I couldn't hear myself. A moment later, he broke free, covered in blood that wasn't all his, stumbling toward me. Then something caught his leg. Josh hit the ground. The crowd swallowed him. I never saw him get back up. I had been out of ammunition for 3 minutes. The last magazine was gone. The backup pistol was gone. The knife at my belt had broken somewhere during the retreat. Around me, the farm was dying. The barn was on fire. The perimeter lights were shattered. 2 months earlier, the zombies had learned to throw rocks at the bulbs. I had laughed the first time I saw it happen because it seemed impossible. Then they kept doing it. I had underestimated how fast they adapted. That mistake had killed us. Everything after that was my fault. I pressed my back against the truck and tried to think. Couldn't. There was no room left for thought. Only exhaustion. Only terror. Only the certainty that I was about to die. Hands reached for me from every direction. Gray, cold, rotting, purposeful. One of them closed around my wrist. I looked down and stopped fighting. I recognized the hand. I recognized the scar on the thumb, a crescent-shaped mark from a rusted hinge when I was 7 years old. I had cried harder than he did. He had laughed and lifted me onto his shoulders and said, "Iron girl, it's just a scratch." The thing holding my wrist had my father's hand. My father's eyes, my father's face, but my father was gone. There was nothing behind those eyes now. No patience, no kindness, no warmth, no recognition. The man who used to kiss my forehead and tell me everything would be all right had vanished weeks ago. What stood in front of me was only hunger wearing his skin. I didn't pull away. I couldn't, not because I was trapped, because I was tired, so unbelievably tired. I had failed him in the first weeks. I had failed my mother 2 weeks after that. I had failed Josh 2 minutes ago. I had failed everyone I had ever loved. The zombie that used to be my father pulled me forward. The first bite tore into my shoulder. Pain exploded through me. The second took my throat. Warm blood flooded down my chest. I fell to my knees. The world tilted sideways. The dead closed around me. For one impossible second, I thought I saw my mother among them too. Then everything blurred. The last thing I felt was my father's scarred thumb brushing my wrist as the darkness rushed in. And then there was nothing. And then I woke up. My bedroom ceiling, the crack in the plaster above the window, the sound of my mother's radio from the kitchen downstairs. I lay completely still for 30 seconds. My hands were shaking so badly I could feel the mattress vibrating. I pressed them flat and made myself breathe until my vision stopped blurring. Then I got up and walked downstairs on unsteady legs and stood in the kitchen doorway and just looked at them. My mother at the stove. My father at the table with his coffee and his paper and the crease in his forehead he always got from reading small print. His left hand was wrapped around his mug. The thumb, the scarred one resting against the ceramic, still there, just a scar. I started crying before I could stop it. Not quietly, the kind that comes from somewhere deep and animal. I slid down the door frame and sat on the kitchen floor and shook, and my mother dropped everything and was beside me in seconds, and my father was kneeling in front of me with his hands on my face saying my name. I couldn't speak for a long time. When I could, I told them everything. I had been dead. I had nothing left to protect by being careful. I told them about the outbreak, the mosquitoes that would come in 7 months, the virus, what the infected became. I told them about the debt my Uncle Dion was going to bring to our door. I told them about every death I had watched. I told them about my own. My father was quiet for a long time. My mother held my hand. Then my father said, "I would rather be wrong and broke than be a little richer and risk breaking your heart." He leaned forward and kissed my forehead. His thumb, the scarred one, cupped my face, and I had to close my eyes. My mother squeezed my hand and said, "What's the worst that can happen? If it makes you feel safer, we'll do it gladly. And you still need to take care of your leukemia, darling. That's non-negotiable." She kissed my cheek. I sat on the kitchen floor between them, and for a moment the weight of every memory I was carrying lifted just enough that I could breathe. The debt was the first thing I killed. When Uncle Dion called with his restaurant proposal, my father said no before Dion finished the sentence. When Viktor Soll's name came up, my father wrote it down, called our county sheriff, and that door closed permanently within a week. Next, Josh. I told him everything the same way I'd told my parents, directly, completely, without softening. He already trusted me. He had been driving me home after late shifts for 8 months. He had adjusted my schedule around my leukemia medication without making it something I owed him for. My parents liked him for exactly those reasons. He sat with what I told him longer than my parents had. Then he said, "What do you need?" That was Josh. No performance. Just, "What do you need?" We dug the cellar, 12 feet deep, steel reinforced, stocked with 6 months of food and medicine. We sealed the house and barn. I trained every morning, building the body I'd need. Josh trained beside me and became better than I'd expected. He had a stillness under pressure that couldn't be taught. 6 months later, the mosquitoes came. Enormous creatures, wings like black lace, swarming at night across 3 terrible weeks. The virus spread fast. The infected became what I knew they would become. Fast, purposeful, eyes gone solid crimson. Then the mosquitoes died, all of them, abruptly, as if switched off. What remained were the zombies, and they were not going away. My preparation saved us. We lost no one in our household. Survivors arrived, and I let them in. Marcus and Diana Pelletier came first. Marcus was bitten early stage. I knew the treatment window, we had the medication, and 3 days later he cleared and wept over a bowl of rice while Diana held him. The Okoro brothers came next, Emeka, an electrician, and Tobias, ex-Army Reserve. Then Priya, a nurse practitioner who arrived on a bicycle, looked at Marcus alive and recovering and said without preamble, "Tell me your protocol." She unpacked her bag and never left. Chad Breck arrived alone, a former debt collector for Viktor Soll, hands visible, asking to earn his place. I watched him for a week before opening the gate. A decade of reading people turned out to be useful when pointed at something other than exploitation. Uncle Dion arrived with 6 stragglers. I met him at the gate and told him I knew exactly who he had been. He didn't argue. He said he knew it too. I opened the gate. Dion found his role with the children, patient in a way that mattered, sitting for hours in our makeshift school reading to kids who had seen too much. My father watched him through the window sometimes and said nothing, and something between them slowly changed. We built the perimeter, welded steel mesh, motion sensor lights. The zombies hated strong light, and we used that without mercy. We expanded from 6 acres to 22. We built a clinic and a school. We wrote laws and enforced them equally. Josh ran daily operations. Priya ran the clinic. My father managed the livestock and crops. My mother fed everyone, which kept us human when everything outside the fence was trying to make us something else. 163 people by the end of 18 months. Then Viktor Soll arrived. He came with 17 people, 3 trucks, and a weapons cache that tripled ours. He accepted our rules. He sat in council meetings and listened more than he spoke and asked questions that were always reasonable and never quite revealing what he was actually calculating. Patient the way predators are patient, not from calm, but from strategy. We learned what he was in fragments. Survivors from his former operation arrived in small groups over the following weeks and told their stories quietly, in corners, in the clinic, in private conversations that eventually reached me. I will not describe what he had done. The weight of it was visible in the faces of the people who had survived him. I was building a case. I was moving too slowly. He found Mark first, a quiet man who hadn't come back from losing his family in the outbreak. Soll cultivated him over 3 weeks. A cigarette behind the equipment shed. Then conversations. Then access Mark should never have had. Cole died on a Tuesday. We found him in the storage building alongside what was missing: 1/3 of our medical supplies, 2 weapons caches, the emergency radio equipment. Mark was gone. Soll was gone. I stood in the empty room and felt the failure settle into me like something physical. I had known. I had not moved fast enough. "This is on me," I said. Josh said, "Then fix it." Viktor came back 4 months later with 47 fighters. He came in daylight, which was new. He had studied us. He had learned from the time he spent inside our walls, and that knowledge made him more dangerous than any number of fighters could. The alarm went at 6 in the morning. I was already at the perimeter. The battle was long and desperate. Garrett took a bullet in the chest in the first 10 minutes, indispensable Garrett, who had argued about everything and been exactly right more often than I had told him. Nessa, 23 years old, didn't survive the Eastern breach. There were others. Viktor fought from behind his line, directing, repositioning, intelligent about it. My father reached him first. 60 years of farm work in those hands, and he hit Viktor hard enough to crack 2 ribs and strip away that cold composure. Dion, bleeding from a gash across his side, came from behind with a fence post. Josh opened a wound across Viktor's shoulder. Viktor escaped. Injured, furious, but free, and I made myself stay rather than pursue, because pursuing alone was dying, and I had already done that once. Josh collapsed 20 minutes later. The wound in his side was worse than I'd realized. Dion was down by the barn, conscious but gray-white. Priya moved between them with the expression of someone calculating impossible numbers. "How bad?" I asked. She looked at me. "Bad. We need equipment we don't have." Mercy Regional was 8 miles north and dense with the dead. Every infected person who had crawled toward help during the outbreak was still inside. We had agreed, in a council meeting months ago, that it wasn't worth the cost. Now the cost of not going was Josh, was Dion, Was Priya telling me she had done everything she could? I chose 6, myself, Tobias, Reed, Corina, Barb, and Darnell. We went at dawn. The lobby was thick with zombies, 50 or more visible, more in the corridors beyond. We moved fast, pushed light ahead of us, and the dead recoiled enough to give us passage if we didn't hesitate. The deeper we went, the darker it got. Reed died on the 2nd floor. He had gone ahead to clear a corridor, and a cluster came from a side room, and it was over before anyone could reach him. We kept moving because stopping meant dying with him, and Josh dying an hour later with it meaning nothing. Corina died in the stairwell on the way down with the equipment loaded on us. She looked back and said, "Go." We obeyed. That logic has not made it easier. I found the last of what we needed and was loading it when something I hadn't heard hit me from behind. I went down hard onto cold tiles. I remember the smell of antiseptic beneath the rot. I remember Tobias shouting somewhere behind me. I remember thinking, not again. There was weight on my back and something hot and wet running down my neck, and I couldn't get my arms to work. The hospital floor was cold against my face. I could hear Tobias fighting somewhere behind me, and I could hear the dead converging on the sound of it, and I understood with absolute clarity that I was not getting up. That this was it. My second chance, everything I had built, everyone I had saved, it was ending on a hospital floor 8 miles from home. I thought of the first timeline. I thought of Josh's face in the crowd of bodies, his mouth forming my name right before he went down. I thought of my mother in the garden at twilight and the sound she made. I thought of my father's hands, the scarred thumb, and the thing behind his eyes that wasn't him anymore. I had lived through that death once. I had been given everything. And I had come back here and bled out on a floor while the people I loved were still dying. I thought, I'm sorry. I thought I failed them again. Then something cracked open inside my chest. Not pain, the opposite of pain. A warmth so complete and sudden it erased everything else. Then it moved outward through my arms, through my palms pressed flat against the cold tiles, through the air around me like a wave expanding from a stone dropped in still water. White light, the kind that doesn't burn. When it stopped, I was on my knees. The wound at the back of my head was gone, not healed slowly, just gone. Tobias stood 6 feet away staring at his hands. The old shoulder injury that had limited his range for months had vanished. He rotated the arms slowly, his expression somewhere between awe and terror. Barb was pressing her hand to her forearm where a deep gash had sealed itself clean. Darnell said, very quietly, "Meghan, I don't know," I said. "Has that happened before?" "No. We took the equipment and left." I didn't speak again until we were outside with the settlement fence visible in the distance. I was frightened in a way that had nothing to do with zombies, frightened of what was inside me, of what I had just done without understanding it, of what it might take from me the next time. Something had cracked open and I didn't know if it would close. I kept walking. Part 8, saving Josh the equipment worked. Priya used all of it through most of a night, and by morning Dion was stable, pale, furious at his own helplessness, but stable. Josh was not. Priya came to find me at dawn and sat across from me at my parents' kitchen table and said what I already knew. "I've done everything possible. His body isn't responding. I don't think he's going to make it through tomorrow." I nodded. I had already decided. I went to Josh. He opened his eyes when I came in and managed something like recognition. I sat on the edge of his bed and took his hand. His fingers were cold. I'm going to do something, I said. I don't know what it costs me. I'm going to do it anyway. He tried to speak. I put my other hand on his chest and reached for the warmth. It came slower this time, deliberate, like drawing water from a deep well. I pushed everything I had toward him. I felt the moment his breathing deepened and steadied. I felt the moment his fingers tightened around mine. Then I felt nothing at all. I woke up 3 days later. Josh told me what happened. He was still pale and moving carefully, but alive and sitting up. Viktor came back on the second day. He was badly injured from the first assault, arm in a sling, moving slowly. But he was the kind of man who cannot leave something unfinished. He came with 16 remaining fighters. Not enough to take the settlement by force, he knew that, so he didn't try. He split his people into 2 groups. 12 went at the main perimeter, noise, muzzle flash, enough pressure to pull every defender to the fence. The other 4 went for the water filtration, building on the settlement's east side. They got inside before Emeka spotted them through the clinic window and raised the alarm. They had time to destroy 3 of the 4 primary filtration units and contaminate the reserve tank before Tobias and Chad reached them. We would have no clean water for 11 days, in winter, with 170 people. That was Viktor being Viktor. Even injured, even beaten, he found the thing that would hurt most and went for it. And then, in the chaos of the water building, he made his real move. While every defender on the east side was focused on the filtration room, Viktor himself crossed the yard toward the farmhouse. Toward me. Rhea was in the yard. She was 14, one of the girls we'd rescued from the shelter. She had been running a message to the South Watch post when Viktor appeared. She saw him. She didn't run. She stepped into his path. He shot her in the shoulder and walked past her. My father was in the barn doorway. He had heard the shot. He stepped out and planted himself between Viktor and the farmhouse door. My father, who is not a soldier, who has spent his whole life being gentle, standing with a pitchfork in his hands in the cold yard. Viktor raised his gun. Josh shot Viktor's gun hand from 12 feet away. He had gotten out of bed. Priya had told him not to. My mother had told him not to. He told them both he'd heard that before and gone to the perimeter with a pistol and the specific stillness that had always made him frightening when it mattered. Viktor went down. He tried to rise. Tobias and Chad were on him before he could, and it was over. Completely, finally over. The remaining fighters surrendered. The settlement held. Rhea survived. The bullet had passed clean through the shoulder. She was furious at herself for not moving faster, which told me everything I needed to know about who she was going to become. It took us 11 days to rebuild the water system. They were 11 very hard days. Viktor had made sure of that right until the end. The first thing I saw when I woke was Josh in the chair beside my bed, reading. He looked up when I moved and put the book down. "Good morning," he said. "How long?" 3 days. I looked at my hands. They looked the same. I felt hollowed out, not painfully, just deeply emptied, as though something had been used to its last reserve. Priya came and checked my eyes and pulse. Eventually, she said, "The power. Does it cost you?" I thought about the complete and total expenditure of something I had no name for. Yes. Is it permanent? I don't know. She wrote in her notes and didn't push. I was grateful for that. The funerals were 3 days later in the South Yard. We buried Garrett first, indispensable, infuriating, irreplaceable Garrett, who had argued about everything and been right more often than I'd ever told him. Then Reed, who had gone ahead in the hospital corridor without hesitating. Then Corina, who had told us to go. Then Nessa, 23 years old, who had learned to fight inside these walls and given everything defending them. My father read their names aloud one at a time, and the settlement stood in the cold and held what had been lost without making it smaller than it was. Afterward, Josh found me at the fence line. "He's not coming back," Josh said. "No, but something else will." He was right. Priya's behavioral observations of the infected were showing things I didn't have explanations for: groups changing direction without stimulus, clusters pausing at our perimeter as if receiving a signal we couldn't detect. They were changing. Slowly and deliberately in a direction that was not toward less dangerous. I looked out past the fence at the broken world that was still mine to navigate. Something else will, I agreed, and we'll be here. I thought about the first timeline, about the parking lot on day 43. About Josh going down in a crowd of bodies while I watched and couldn't reach him. About my mother in the garden. About my father's hands, that scarred thumb, the crescent mark from a rusted hinge, reaching for me in the dark. I thought about waking up in my own bed with a second chance I had not earned and could not explain. I had spent almost 2 years trying to be worthy of it. I had failed in ways that cost people their lives. I had also saved lives that would otherwise be gone, 163 people who were eating breakfast right now, who had names and children and griefs and futures, who existed because I had come back and chosen differently. That was not nothing. That was everything. I looked at my father across the yard. He was at the animal pen, one hand on the fence post, watching the morning settle. His left thumb, the scarred one, rested against the wood, alive, present, still himself. I was not the woman who had died in that parking lot. I was not the leader who had missed Viktor Soll until it was too late. I was what every mistake and every second chance had made me. I was ready for whatever came next. The morning light was gold over the fields. Behind me, my mother was starting the breakfast fire. Josh was beside me. My father was alive. That was enough to keep going. It had to be.
Thanks for watching until the very end. If this story pulled you in, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more dark stories, cursed worlds, impossible choices, and sleepless nights, subscribe to the channel. Until next time. See you in the next nightmare.